So let's just say, let's start off by saying the wind is coming from the northeast. And our boat, we took off the stern line, so our boat is tied up on the dock with just the bow line, and it's facing into the wind, just like that. We have to ask ourselves, the very first thing we do, is we have to ask ourselves what direction we're going to push the boat off of. We always have two choices. We always can push off to port or to starboard. There always is going to be a safer direction, and that's always the direction we want to choose. So I think the easiest way to think about this concept is imagine our boat is a needle on the dock, just like that. The needle and the boat are both facing into the wind. The direction that you want to push the boat off on is the direction that is the larger angle between the dock and the needle, the boat. So if we look at our needle right here, the port side, this is a much larger angle than this side. So in this instance, we would push the boat off on the port side. Now, something we see a lot of, like let's just say in this instance, we have a boat right here, and people will say, well, the exit's right here, I just want to push the boat off and I'll kind of sneak out and go where I need to go. So what they'll do is they'll try to push off to starboard. What they run into though is as soon as you, and we see this all the time, as soon as you push the bow in the wrong direction like this, the boat's going to exit the no sail zone and it's going to power up and it's going to hit the dock. So a lot of times we'll see people push away and then bounce the nose of the boat down the dock until they get out. Or sometimes if they're back here, they might be able to turn the boat tight enough, but then they basically sideswipe all the boats on their way out. So we really want to make sure when it comes to launching the boat, we always want to push off in the safest direction, whatever side is going to be the larger angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give us some different wind directions, and I want you to kind of think about, okay, what direction are we going to push off, port or starboard? All right, we have the wind coming from the southeast. Our boat is facing into the no sail zone. What direction will we push off, port or starboard? It's going to be to starboard. That's the larger angle. If I draw the needle on the dock, you can see that this is a much larger angle than that. So we're going to push off to starboard. Now we have the wind coming from the southwest. Our boat is tied up on the dock with just the bow line. What direction, port or starboard? Starboard, yep. This one's going to be a little bit easier because we can't go to port or else we're just going to hit the dock. So we're just going to push off to starboard. You just have to be aware in this instance that because the no sail zone is right here, you're going to have to push the boat off hard enough to get through the no sail zone and then start sailing away from your dock over in this direction. All right, we have the wind coming from the north. Our boat is alongside the dock. Port or starboard? Port or starboard? Port. This direction. That's going to be the way away from the dock. That's going to be the safest way for us to depart. And then we'll just, as we sail away, need to either tack or jibe to exit. In this instance, the wind is coming directly out of the east. So what direction? Port or starboard? Technically, it doesn't matter. Technically, the boat, if you look at both angles, they're the exact same. So we could push off to port if we wanted, or we could push off to starboard. A lot of people in this instance opt to just push off to starboard because that's going to be closest to where they want to go. But what we want to keep in mind with this instance, because it's a little bit different, is the wind is rarely going to be coming directly out of the east. Normally, if it's coming out of the east, it's our trade winds, which are going to be bouncing back and forth between east and northeast. So if you're out there rigging for 10 or 15 minutes, check the wind vane on the top of the boat, see how the boat's moving on the dock, look at the American flag, because more than likely the wind is going to be switching from east to northeast. So if we keep that in mind, that means the boat's going to be rotating from directly east kind of over here like this. And that would mean that we want to push off to port. So if we were going to depart the dock with an abundance of caution, if we know the wind's going to be bouncing back and forth, east, northeast, we should probably push off to port. If you're going to be pretty quick about it and you look at the dock, all right, the wind's coming from the east, the boat looks good, let's push off quickly before it changes, that's something you can absolutely do as well. Just keep in mind, easterly winds normally are bouncing back and forth east, northeast. The second major thing that we want to kind of keep in mind when we're departing the dock is we want to anticipate what we need to do with our sails. So if we look at this boat right here and we say, okay, what direction are we going to push off, port or starboard? we're going to push off to port. That's the larger angle. So let's say the boat pushes away from the dock. We turn away from the dock. What point of sail do you think the boat's on, based on where the wind is coming from? The boat is probably going to be on a beam reach. So before you push off, you want to think, okay, as we're turning away from the dock, what point of sail are we going to end up on? Because we know we're going to be on a beam reach, we want to kind of have our sails preset so that as we turn away from the dock, as soon as we're safely away from the dock, the sails are going to fill with air and then you're going to be able to sail away. A lot of times, this is another place we see people kind of mess up, and what they end up doing most of the time is they have their sails in too far. So let's say this boat up here pushed away from the dock, they had their sails preset about halfway out. They got away from the dock, no problem. This boat, they pushed off, but they had their sails, let's say, let me do another boat here, sorry. Let's say this boat, when they pushed off the dock, they had their sails all the way in. You steer the boat as much with your sails as you do the rudder. So even if you're doing the right thing with the rudder and your sails aren't in the right spot, you're going to have a hard time steering the boat. So someone would push the boat away from the dock, and they'll have the tiller pulled all the way towards them because they're trying to steer the boat away from the dock. But their sails are in all the way, which is trying to pull the boat in the opposite direction. So the tiller's trying to pull the boat in one direction, the sails are trying to pull the boat in the other direction, which means the boat is just going to go straight. And a lot of times what happens is this boat ends up hitting the other boats or hitting kind of the shoreline, the dock area. So a lot of times, if you're trying to turn the boat and the boat's not moving, ease your sail out. We have to steer the boat as much with the rudder as we do with the sails. So when we're launching the boat, anticipate what point of sail am I going to be on? Where do I need to put my sails? All right, here we have a boat that is rigged and ready to go. It's tied up with just the bow line because we released the stern line, which means the boat is facing into the wind right now. Like I mentioned earlier, we want to push the boat off on whatever side has the larger angle. We can definitely see that there's a little bit of an angle to the boat in relation to the dock right now. It's really easy to see that this side, this angle, is significantly larger than this side, which means that we're going to push the boat off on that side, which is the starboard side of the boat. The second main thing we need to focus on is anticipating what we need to do with our sails, what point of sail we're going to be on. So Christian has already anticipated that we're going to be on about a beam reach, so our sails should be about halfway in and halfway out when we push away from the dock. Remember, we steer the boat as much with the sails as we do with the rudder. So if our sails are in the wrong spot, if they're too far sheeted in, that's going to make it really hard to steer away from the dock. You can see that I'm starting to pull the boat sideways alongside the dock, which will make it easier to push off. And then I walk the boat down the dock forward. I'm giving it some forward momentum before I step in, which will make it really easy to steer away from the dock. It's also right about this moment, as we're steering away from the dock, that Christian sheets in his sail just a little bit, which makes it stop luffing and the sail powers up. As soon as I get inside the boat, I sheet in the jib and we're on our way. Let's watch one more example of a good departure. You can see I'm going to pull the boat sideways alongside the dock, which makes it easier to push off. I walk the boat backwards so that we have more space. We're not going to hit the boat in front of us. And then when we're ready, Christian's going to pull the tiller towards him. I push the boat down the dock and step inside. I'm also going to do something here that I didn't do in the last one. I'm going to backwind the jib. That means I'm going to pull the jib in on the wrong side, which is going to help pull the nose of the boat away from the dock. As soon as the bow is clear, I sheet the jib in back on the correct side. In this instance, the wind is coming from the northeast. Think for a second about which direction I'm going to push the boat off on, port or starboard. So I'm going to push it off to port. That's the safest direction. You can see I start to push the boat down the dock, and I'm remembering that my sails aren't in too far, they're luffing, and then as soon as I'm away from the dock, I can sheet in. Now let's look at how we don't want to leave the dock. You can see that instead of walking the boat down the dock and giving us forward momentum, I'm just going to push the boat straight backwards. Because I do this, I now have to sail the boat backwards, with my steering being opposite, until the boat starts moving forward. So while it is a legitimate way to leave the dock, it often is kind of reserved for the more experienced sailors. The last thing I want to mention are the rocks in the harbor. The rocks pretty much drop straight off, So even though our harbor isn't a very large area, you can pretty much sail directly up to the rocks without any fear of running aground on reef or anything like that. So if we jump back to this example, the wind is coming out of the southeast, so we're going to have to sail upwind in order to get out of the harbor. You can see we're sailing close hauled right now, our sails are in, and just watch how close we get to the rocks before we tack. Because we wait so long to tack, we're able to tack once and get out of the harbor, versus the majority of people who tack too soon end up having to kind of pinball tack back and forth multiple times.